Okay, all right, let's bring it in. Let me have your attention. Go ahead and put the phones up. Let's run through this real quick, and we should get done before the end of class. So we just have a little bit we need to take care of today. Okay, so last thing that we had in there is symbiosis notes. We need the next 2 pages, side by side. First things first, only the vocabulary that starts with benthos. That's going to go on the top of the left-hand side page. Go ahead and tape only that vocab sheet in. Fold it over so that we can see the terms but not the definitions. And go ahead and tape it in. Yep. Borrow from one of the deals around you. And in fact, I think there's one in a Ziploc bag behind you too. And then I'll get you one. Is there none in there at all? Well, go ahead and use it up then, and I'll put 2 of them. Yeah, I'll get 2 rolls. There should be one in one of those Ziploc bags behind you too. Okay, on the right-hand side, smaller picture on the top that's got the little ducks on it. We are going to add information underneath it, so make sure that you tape it in so that we can get to the notebook page underneath. The larger aquatic ecosystem picture goes on the bottom. Once again, we're going to add some information underneath it, so make sure you tape it in so that we can get to the notebook page underneath. Those are the only 2 pictures that are going to be on that page. We just need to be able to get to the notebook page underneath it. As soon as you've got that taped in, turn to the next 2 pages. As soon as you got that taped in, turn to the next 2 pages. All right. Big vocab sheet. We need just a little bit of room underneath, so kind of tape it closer to the top. Oh, I just counted you absent. Run by the office. Pardon? All right, on the right-hand side page, we have 2 pictures that we're putting in, and we're putting them on the top of the page because we have information that needs to go on the bottom half. So first things first, we need the picture that looks like this, and it can be taped completely down to the page. The next picture, the one that's got the United States on it, we can lay that on top, but once again, we need to see underneath it, so tape it so that we can get to the information underneath. first vocab page. Oh, wait, we didn't do that first. We did the picture first. Do the pictures first, because it'll make a little bit more sense. Been a long day. Okay, so this is on the right-hand side. This is underneath the picture with little ducks on it. Aquatic ecosystems. So we have a smaller aquatic ecosystem, like a pond or a lake maybe, and then a larger ecosystem. The aquatic ecosystem on the bottom might be something more along the lines of an ocean. So when we're looking at this smaller ecosystem, it's divided into zones based on characteristics and where those critters are at, or what type of critters are going to be there. So the littoral zone, this is an area that's near the shore, near the banks of the pond or lake. So the littoral zone, it's near the shore. It's rich with nutrients. And so that means there's lots of biodiversity there. Yes, Littoral. Littoral zone near the shore, the banks, if you will, of the lake, the pond. And it's rich with nutrients. There's lots of biodiversity in that area. Lots of nutrients means lots of food for different types of critters. So we've got lots of biodiversity, lots of diversity of life. Right? The Linetic zone is the open water area. So basically smack dab in the middle of your body of water. The Linetic zone is the area of open water. Linetic zone is the area of open water. Then the benthic zone, that's basically the bottom of the pond, bottom of the lake. So this zone includes decomposers who break down dead material that settle on the bottom of the pond or lake. So this zone includes decomposers that break down materials that settle on the bottom of the pond or lake. Benthic zone includes decomposers who break down dead materials that settle on the bottom of the pond or lake. All right. So this area provides soil, nutrients, has plenty of water, access to water, So we're going to have lots of different kinds of plants, animals, lots of different species that can live in here. That's why there's so much biodiversity. Benthic zone represents all of this area right here. So the bottom surface of that aquatic ecosystem. Limnetic zone, that's the open area of water. So all of this area will, in fact, extend it out. This area right here represents that open area in that aquatic ecosystem. All right, second diagram that we have. These regions that we're looking at these regions more in terms of how much light there is. Photic zone, photograph, photosynthesis, photoreceptors, light. The photic zone, this is in an area of shallow water, and so there's lots of sunlight that's able to penetrate through. Lots of nutrients available. Photic zone, shallow water, lots of sunlight and nutrients. But then you get to a certain point to where either there's a lot of water or there's a lot of stuff in the water. So if you have particulate matter in the water, whether it be organic or inorganic stuff that's in there, you can't see through it as well. The light's not going to shine through. Think of it kind of like if you go down to the beach, to the lake, swimming area at the lake. You know, if nobody's messing around with it and the water's real still, you can probably see down to the sand and the rocks underneath it. But if you step in that and stir up that material, then you can't see through it anymore. When the water's real choppy and when it's really windy out and there's a lot of movement in that water, you know, it all looks kind of brown here in Oklahoma, just a big old puddle of brown, and you can't see through it because of all of that sediment that's being stirred up. It doesn't let the light through. The area of the aquatic ecosystem where there's some light but not much is called the twilight zone. We have dim light there. Twilight is kind of like at dusk when the sun's going down. There's a little bit of light but not much. Sure. Werewolves. Oh, the drama. Then eventually, especially in an oceanic ecosystem, the water is going to be so deep, you can go so far down that there's going to be an area where no sunlight penetrates, no light gets down. Because no sunlight reaches the bottom layer of the ocean, there is no photosynthesis taking place. Organisms must be heterotrophs, decomposers, or chemotrophs. Because no sunlight reaches the bottom layer of the ocean, there is no photosynthesis taking place here. Organisms must be heterotrophs, decomposers, or chemotrophs. Because no sunlight reaches the bottom layer of the ocean, there's no photosynthesis taking place here. Organisms must be heterotrophs, decomposers, or chemotrophs. Because no sunlight reaches the bottom layer of the ocean, there is no photosynthesis taking place here. Organisms must be heterotrophs, decomposers, or chemotrophs. Heterotrophs, decomposers, or chemotrophs. Autotrophs can make their own food. Heterotrophs have to eat other things to get their nutrients. Decomposers break down plant or animal material. Chemotrophs, chemicals. So instead of going through photosynthesis, they're using chemicals to create organic matter. Okey-doke. So, photic zone, we have sunlight. Twilight, we've got dim light. No light at the bottom of this aquatic ecosystem. With a pond or a lake aquatic ecosystem, you're going to have changes in water levels, but it's usually dependent on environmental changes, like you get a bunch of rain or you get no rain or something like that. In an oceanic ecosystem, you have tides that move in and out each day. So the limnetic zone is essentially an intertidal zone where we've got tides that are moving in and out. You got high water and low water, and that could be a daily situation. All right, so let's take a look at some of the types of critters that live in aquatic ecosystems. Benthos, please read for us the definition of benthos. Candace. Yeah, and I need to fix that one too. So aquatic organisms that are bottom dwellers, they either live attached to hard surfaces or they burrow into the sediment. They're crawling around on that sediment that's on the bottom surface. So that's why the benthic zone kind of makes sense now. So this area right here is the bottom surface of our aquatic ecosystem, and so little critters that live in that benthic zone are called benthos. Nectin. Let's skip eutrophication for just a minute. Nectin, read for us the definition of nectin, please, Bella. So this is probably what you normally think of when you think of aquatic ecosystems and the critters that live there, the things that swim around. Plankton. Zach. And plankton? All right, so plankton are critters that aren't free swimming. They are at the mercy of the tides and the currents themselves. So they're basically kind of floating around there, and wherever the current takes them, that's where they're going to go. That's where they're going to move them. Free swimming critters, they have locomotion. They have the ability, the motility to move in a certain area on purpose. Whereas the plankton ones, they're moving, like I said, they're at the mercy of whatever the currents are. All right, so, pardon? Right. They might like float to the chum bucket, but only if the water's moving that way. No, not anymore. My kids are all grown up, so. All right, so some examples of critters that are benthos. Coral, sea anemones, we looked at those the other day. The lobsters were in the picture crawling around on the benthic zone. Worms are an example of a decomposer that would burrow into that sediment on the bottom of that aquatic ecosystem. Coral, sea anemones, lobster, worms. Anemones, anemones. Coral, sea anemones, lobster, worms. Yep, grab yourself a highlighter, highlight the term benthos. Boxin are examples of benthos so that we know that they go together. All right, we'll skip eutrophication for just a minute. We'll go to nectin, the free swimming critters, what you normally think of being in an aquatic ecosystem. All the different types of fish, whales, turtles, shrimp, seahorses. So tuna and all the other different types of fish, whales, turtles, shrimp. These are the guys that are free swimming. So they're not walking around on the surface, they're not, or on the bottom layer, they're not burrowing into that sediment at the bottom. They are free swimming. They have the ability to go where they, with a purpose in a specific direction, to swim in a direction. The plankton were critters that drift, so they're at the mercy of the currents. There's actually two types of plankton. One of them is kind of more plant-like, and one of them is kind of more animal-like. So phytoplankton are the type of plankton that are a little bit more plant-like. They're going to be like the bacteria, the algae, the things that can go through photosynthesis. Zooplankton are more animal-like. So zoology has to deal with animals. So these are going to be critters that either they themselves are at the mercy of the currents, or maybe they're one of their phases of reproduction are. So they might lay eggs or have larvae that gets swished around and moved to new places simply by those currents. So plankton, we have phytoplankton, like algae and cyanobacteria. Those are the plant-like plankton. And then we have zooplankton, animal-like plankton, so it's going to be some critters' larvae, it might be the eggs, which obviously they're not going to be able to swim on their own, they don't have their own motility. Lots of protists, like amoeba need the more shallow water, but they don't swim freely. So phytoplankton, algae, cyanobacteria, zooplankton, eggs, larvae, protists, jellyfish. Okay, grab yourself a highlighter. Box in the appropriate examples, match them with your vocab terms. That brings us to eutrophication. So eutrophication, let's see. Next week we do our porosity permeability lab, so we'll be looking at soils. The week after that, I think we get into pollution and contamination. And so there's man-made eutrophic conditions, and then there's natural eutrophic conditions. So this is not a great thing, but it happens in nature. We have a tendency to kind of, help that out and speed the process up a little bit, but just understand that this eutrophic process can be a natural one as well. All right, read for us that definition, please, Brooklyn. So these little critters that are in this aquatic ecosystem, they're submerged in the water, and for the most part, they still need oxygen for their cellular respiration, but they don't get it from the atmosphere like we do. So they have to get it from the water that's around them. It's dissolved in there. It's kind of like your bottle of pop. So it's fizzy because it's got carbon dioxide in it. It's got carbon dioxide pumped in it. But if I leave my pop open and leave it on the tabletop for a day or two, is it still going to be fizzy? No, especially if it heats up. That's helping that carbon dioxide to be released from that liquid, and it's not going to stay in there. Oxygen is dissolved in that same way in an aquatic ecosystem, and that's what those critters that live in that ecosystem, that's how they get it. Same thing happens. If it heats up too much, that water can't hold on to that dissolved oxygen, and it can lose it that way. Or we can have a process by which the critters that are already in there essentially use it up. So this goes underneath your vocab. In the eutrophication process, the first step is that there is a large increase, and at times very rapid increase, in the nutrient content of an aquatic ecosystem. A large, and at times very rapid, increase in the nutrient content of an aquatic ecosystem. Thank you for reading. Thank you for reading. Oops, sorry. I have to go find my sticks here. Thank you for reading. Thank you for reading. A large increase, at times it's very rapid, in the nutrient content of an aquatic ecosystem. So in nature, in a natural situation, it may be that there was a flood, a whole bunch of flooding rains, and so it pulled off a bunch of nutrients from one area or another. In a man-made situation, it might be that they're spreading fertilizer, and so they spread it too much, and it ends up getting into the aquatic ecosystem that's nearby. And so it's not necessarily on purpose, but it's fertilizer. And so the fertilizer is nutrients for the plants that live on land. Well, the plant-like stuff that's in the aquatic ecosystem are going to use it in the exact same way. So if we have tons of nutrient content all at once, then that leads to an exponential growth of plants and algae. An exponential growth of plants and algae. Exponential growth of plants and algae. We just talked about exponential growth not too long ago. Do you remember the shape of the graph if it was exponential growth? What letter did we compare it to? We compared it to a J. It goes up pretty fast. And so that's the same thing that's happening with these critters. Exponential growth. Exponential growth, all of a sudden, you're going to have these plants, this plant material die off because it's not going to live forever, but because there was such an exponential growth, there's going to be a huge die-off. And when those plants and algae die, they settle on the bottom, and the decomposers get to work, which is great because that's what they're supposed to do. The problem is that decomposers need oxygen in order to break stuff down. Where does it get the oxygen from? Aquatic ecosystem that they're living in. When plants and algae die, the decomposers that break materials down use up the oxygen. When plants and algae die, the decomposers that break materials down use up the oxygen. They need the oxygen for their cellular respiration. And so if they need extra oxygen in order to break down that dead material, they're going to get it from the water around them. But when they use up that oxygen in the water around them, then it's like the stale pop. There's no more gas dissolved in there. And every other critter that's swimming around in there needs the oxygen as well. And so if there's no more gas dissolved in that water, they can't pull it out to breathe, and then they're going to die. So if the oxygen is used up, the other critters that are living in that ecosystem are going to perish. Other organisms like fish die to the lack of dissolved oxygen in the water. Other organisms like fish die due to the lack of dissolved oxygen in the water.